You're tuned into Recovery TV, the voice of hope, with your host, John J. Tassoni Jr. Discussions and information on addiction and mental health issues. Now, here's John and today's guest.
Welcome to Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni. Thank you for joining us today. You know, the system is working in some respects, and a lot of other respects, the system is not working. More and more people are trying illicit drugs on the street. Today we're going to talk to Fred Trapassi, who is the president and CEO of AdCare. Fred, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
John, good afternoon. It's always a pleasure. Just want to say, you know, there's Rhode Island in a lot of ways. We have a real mosaic of independent voices, but Recovery TV has come such a long way in being really leading that pack, leading that charge. So I just want to say thank you and that it's really an honor to be here with you today.
Well, thank you for being the prime sponsor.
But of course.
If we got to keep on going. So Fred, let's talk about AdCare as a whole.
Sure.
And let's talk about the new vision coming in and hopefully in 2024 with AdCare.
Sure. So AdCare Rhode Island right now, we operate a 59-bed facility up in North Kingstown, both detox and residential treatment for anyone who needs it, any adult who's in need of treatment in Rhode Island and elsewhere. We have people coming from out of state as well. We also operate two satellite outpatient offices, one in Greenville, and one in South Kingstown. And probably within the next couple of months, we'll be operating a third, our Warwick office, which used to fall under the auspices of the hospital in Worcester, which will now become part of ARI, AdCare Rhode Island. The other big thing on the horizon is we're just about ready to sign a contract for an additional 21 beds on the property, so that will bring us to 80 beds. And as you well know, the need is tremendous. I mean, we're pretty much full with a waiting list every day. So we're really looking forward to breaking ground and having those beds online by the end of the fourth quarter this year.
Yeah. So what about your census, Fred? Is it more on the female end, more on the male end, or is it 50-50?
I think historically we've been more on the male end, you know, maybe 70-30, 65-35. And that continues to today. We are seeing an increase in female admissions, but again, it's still primarily male admissions at this point.
In your estimation, what is the drug of choice right now?
Oh, without a doubt, it's alcohol or fentanyl. Yep. And people don't even use, the last time I was on your program, I had made the comment that heroin no longer exists in this country. I mean, you really have to search far and wide if you're looking for heroin, per se. You know, we used to talk about white china, black tar. I mean, you just can't find those anymore. It's almost all fentanyl. When I was first became knowledgeable about fentanyl, it was in a detox in Massachusetts that we used to operate on the previous organization that I worked for. And we had 5 young men come in. They were all a group. They all knew each other. They all came in and all said that they were, injecting heroin. But yet the drug test came back not showing anything, but yet they were clearly in withdrawal, clearly having problems. And that was our first introduction to really understanding fentanyl. And that had to be all of 5, maybe 6 years ago. Now today they come in and the first words out of their mouth when you say, what's your drug of choice? It's fentanyl. I mean, they know they're taking fentanyl. They know it's a dangerous product. But the progression of the disease has led them to a place where it's no easier to stop that than it is anything else. I mean, the fear factor almost goes away, you know, cognitively, in their minds.
Yeah.
Fear factor disappears because the drive behind needing the drug just to stay, you know, what we call normal and not be sick is there, and it's there every hour of every day. So fentanyl, by far, on the opiate side, alcohol, obviously, we saw a big increase over COVID, more people at home, and we're seeing more and more on like the methamphetamine side.
Really?
So Rhode Island. A mixture, yes, doing both. In Rhode Island, you know, we back in the 80s and 90s when crack cocaine was big, we kind of dodged that bullet, even though we're on the 95 corridor. For whatever reason, it really didn't affect Rhode Islanders in the way that it affected some of the other large states up in the Northeast or large cities in the Northeast. But now we're seeing that the influx of methamphetamine and mixing the two, we're seeing that more and more as well.
What about this new phenomenon that's coming into Rhode Island now, this xylazine?
Yeah.
You know, I'm hearing all these horror stories about
They're horror stories, and they're true.
People that are using it, mixing it, when they do use it, their skin is breaking out.
Yes.
They get a big rash.
Yes.
You know, are you seeing a lot of that?
It's a horrible, horrible disease. In many ways, it eats at the tissue. It eats at the flesh. I mean, I can show you pictures of people who have injected in the same sites, who have abscesses and literally holes, you know, in their legs and in their arms from the repeated use. And also, there's a huge concern with Narcan. Because it's a sedative and a very powerful sedative, Narcan doesn't work the same way as it does with someone. It's hard enough, you know, with fentanyl, because they keep changing the analogs. It's harder and harder. I mean, what used to be maybe 1 or 2 doses of Narcan now takes 4 or 5, maybe even 6, and it's injected. It's not even, you know, nasal, intranasal. But we're seeing that more and more. It really doesn't have the same effect, if any, on some of the longer-term, heavier users.
So someone who's in the game, as you are, what's next?
If I knew that, you know, we could solve all the problems of the world. I don't know. I mean, when you think about the number of people, young people, who are dying every day, who have, even if they haven't died, it just destroys their life. It destroys the lives of everyone around them, their family members. I don't know what could possibly be worse than the combination of xylazine and fentanyl. I really don't, but I'm sure there's something out there. I'm sure someone somewhere is working on something that will go even further. It's very scary, and I think for me, the scariest piece, again, I've been doing this for years, decades, John, and addiction was a progressive disease. It didn't just happen today. And, you know, I mean, unless something really went sideways, you didn't die from it today.
Right.
The world we're in now, you take it for the first time, and it's literally Russian roulette with your life. It's not about getting addicted anymore. It's about whether or not you're going to survive the next shot. And, you know, for young people or for people who have been on pharmaceutical painkillers that can no longer get those painkillers, who are out there looking for something to relieve their pain, it's literally Russian roulette. And the odds are much lower than they are with Russian roulette.
You know, you bring up a very good point. And, you know, I've been saying this up at the State House, and people don't realize that a lot of people are suffering for whatever disease, pain.
Correct.
Whether it be all sorts of MS, arthritis, whatever it may be. The doctors only can prescribe so much now because of the FDA and the CDC and about the new regs and all that other stuff that they were so smart to do, but so crazy to do it. Because now the people can't get their pain meds, and they don't want to suffer anymore, so they go to the street, and then guess what? Game over.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. I want to talk more about this when we come back. You're watching Recovery TV. I'm your host, Sean Tassoni. We'll be right back with Fred Trapassi from AdCare.
And now, back to Recovery TV with your host, John J. Tassoni Jr. Recovery TV is made possible by our supporting sponsors and our title sponsor, AdCare. Now, here's John and today's guest.
Welcome back to Recovery TV, and I'm your host, Sean Tassoni. Fred Trapassi is my guest today, and Fred is with AdCare. So, Fred, welcome, and thank you for coming on the show today, and thank you for being the prime sponsor of the show. You know, Fred, it's disturbing to me and everyone that's in the addiction world about what's happening nationally and what's happening in Rhode Island. You know, they think that Narcan was going to save the world. And unfortunately now there's other sidetracks to the Narcan, meaning the alcohol, you know, the benzos, the xylazine, and everything. And I just ask you, what is your thought on that? And it's hard to bring it all into perspective when you have people, whether they're here or overseas, playing with this stuff every day. And as you indicated before, the different composite to the fentanyl, the different composite to the xylazine,
Sure.
and others. I mean, alcohol is alcohol. Alcohol has been around for a while. Nobody thinks we have a problem with alcohol but me and you. Everybody thinks it's great. We leave the liquor stores open, 300% in sales, but there's a problem.
Home delivery, can't forget home delivery.
Home delivery. You know, for my first time this weekend, I saw a truck go into a house. What? We're adding to the problem.
We had one of those delivery trucks deliver something to AdCare.
No kidding.
Yeah, they weren't delivering alcohol, but it was a truck with, had the wraparound
Yeah,
advertisement,
yeah.
and it was a local liquor store, and I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe we had to call them and say, please, have your drive. Your drivers are great, but please don't have that kind of publicity on our site.
Yeah.
But that tells you how far it's gone,
It's gone so far, and I don't think that the powers to be understand the pronounced problem and the lives that it's taking from us.
Right.
I was looking at, there was something on, Chuck Todd did it a few weeks ago, pertaining to the opioid crisis and how many deaths we've had, and they've had other individuals on there talking about the wall, talking about the deliveries, and talking about how much stuff is coming into Canada, how much stuff is coming into Mexico, and we as a nation wanted to hire more IRS agents so we could take our own out instead of hiring more border agents and more DEA agents to try to eradicate this problem. But we're going in the wrong direction.
We are, and I won't even get into all of the problems I have with the current border situation, but certainly with the drugs. I mean, what people have to understand is there are people out there in other countries, whether it's neighbors to our south, neighbors overseas, countries overseas. They're literally spending billions of dollars a year on the creation of these drugs, on these analogs, and billions of dollars a year on how they can get them into the country. And until we really look, some of our, politicians are great. I mean, some of them are the loudest voices out there. Others, if they're interested at all, it's for a talking point, and that has to change. I mean, we're talking about lives, 100,000 lives, more than 100,000 lives last year lost to just fentanyl. Forget about alcohol, cirrhosis, all the related health complications. I mean, we could be talking about 1 million people a year dying from these different drugs and alcohol. And again, until we look at it just as that, if it was anything else, look what happened with COVID. Look at the money and the response that we put together as a nation to combat COVID. You see none of that with drugs and alcohol, and we really have to change our way of, how we think about it, how we think about keeping those drugs out of the country, how we think about either arresting people, treating people, educating people. That's the other big thing, and it just isn't happening. Not at least according to the seriousness of the issue itself. A lot more has to be done. And the other thing we have to do is our medical providers, we have to begin looking at how we address pain in this country. There has to be a better way. It's not simply about being addicted to Percocet. It's much bigger than that. We have people who have legitimate pain. They're going to control that pain. They have to. Why would we want them going to an illegal source? I mean, and the worst part, this well, you can go out and you can buy pills that look exactly like a Percocet, but it's not. It's fentanyl.
Right.
And those people are dying as well. So
that's why I say too on this show that the number of 435, 425, 450, whatever the number is,
right,
that's not really the number.
No.
It's not really the number.
That's the number that's recorded or reported.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the legislature this year did pass some meaningful legislation about reporting and stuff, but that doesn't help the situation.
Right.
The situation is getting worse day by day. When you start losing 1 to 1.5 to 2 people a day, that's called for alarm. Now, if we were losing people with heart attacks, 1, 1.5, 2 a day, 3 a day, you'd see the red flag go up.
Exactly. Yeah, it just more has to be done, and we have to really, really get serious about it. I agree. The response for anything else would be far greater than it is for the use of drugs. And again, people who have been there understand it's not just the individual who overdoses or dies or becomes addicted. That whole family is turned upside down, and in many, many ways, they're never the same after that. You lose a loved one, especially, I mean, imagine losing a child or losing a spouse or a parent.
You know,
Being raised by parents who are addicted to drugs. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
the amount of grandparents now that are watching
Yes.
grandchildren
Yes.
because of loss of their children, or
Sure.
their children in rehab, or they're nowhere to be found. They
Right.
just pack up and they leave the state. There's a whole big cycle here
Correct.
that we haven't grappled with and tried to settle.
Right.
We think as a group we do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, but I said this the other day in a meeting. We have to bring everyone to the table, lock the door, and no one leaves until we get something
We have
going.
a solution, right?
We need a solution. We can't be giving out awards anymore for organizations that, that give out Narcan and do this and do that. We got to give awards out for saving lives.
Yes.
And I want to talk a little bit more about that when we come back. You're watching Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni, here with my good buddy, Fred Trapazzi from AdCare. We'll be back after these messages.
And now, back to Recovery TV with your host, John J. Tassoni Jr. Recovery TV is made possible by our supporting sponsors and our title sponsor, AdCare. Now, here's John and today's guest.
Welcome back to Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni. Fred Trapazzi from AdCare has been my guest. So, Fred, welcome, and thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being a corporate sponsor.
You're
We
welcome.
really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So, Fred, there's been a number of people that are looking for your website and looking for your phone number. So if you wouldn't mind giving me those, that would be
Sure.
great.
Adcare.com is the website, and the phone number here in Rhode Island is 401-294-6160 or 1-800 Rhode Island RI SOBA.
All right, great, thank you. So, Fred, you had talked earlier that maybe 2024, your fourth quarter, or is it fourth quarter this year?
Fourth quarter this year. We're
This
hoping
year,
for
new
before
place, new beds.
Correct.
New facility. All good to
Yes.
go.
Yes. I mean, we have a beautiful facility now. You
Oh,
know
yeah,
that.
no
We're on
doubt.
22 acres of, wooded kind of forestry land, a lot of wildlife. We're kind of off, the main road. So it's very serene. It's very, comfortable. People like it. But the new facility is going to be added onto our B unit. We have 3, large units on the property, which is our residential unit. We frequently get a kind of a bottleneck between the number of people needing detox and then stepping them down into residential. So we're hoping that will not only add beds for residential, but it will free up detox beds that much quicker. So again, we'll be able to accept more individuals, and 80 beds for a state the size of Rhode Island. We're still not talking about a surplus, but we are going to at least do our best to meet the demand.
Yeah. Well, the demand, as we know it, the demand is not going away.
It's not going away.
Not going away at all, and it's only the point of we need to get the rates changed, obviously.
Yes.
To make sure that everyone, gets a piece of the pie per se, and everyone needs to get it to treatment. So, again, I want to thank you for what you do. I know you've been doing it for a long period of time, and probably one of the oldest and most wise individuals in the state under the substance use and mental health. So, thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for what
Thank
you do, and I wish you all the best with your new facility. And
Now we'll have you up for the open house.
well, I would love to cut the
Yes,
ribbon. That'd
yes.
be great.
All right.
All right, well,
Sounds
great.
good.
Thank you. You've been watching Recovery TV, and I'm your host, John Tassoni, here with my good friend Fred from AdCare. We'll see you next week.